2021-22 season with big goals. So the team made some big moves to keep pace in the East, locking up last year's star, bringing back some key players, and adding two exciting names to their roster. Hello and welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley Season 1 finale. I'm Chris Williamson alongside SNY NBA insider Ian Begley, and we're happy to welcome back the CEO and creator of Knicks Fan TV, CP, and we're thrilled to be joined by Bobby Marks, ESPN's NBA front office insider, who will give us some context on the Knicks moves and how they impact both the present and the future. We're live on SNY's Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube pages, as well as streaming on SNY.tv. As always, you can get involved in the comment section throughout this entire stream, but we're going to tip things off with the baseline, Ian. So we'll get into specifics throughout the show, but with the draft over and free agency coming to a close, how do you feel about the Knicks franchise right now?
Well, it's clear that they chose continuity and stability over making a big splash this offseason, and we'll see how that impacts the win-loss record. I know that they're enthused about it. They see Evan Fournier as a pretty good upgrade there at the shooting guard position. They love the Kemba Walker move. And so you're looking at the guys to replace there. Reggie Bullock with Fournier, Elfrid Payton with Kemba Walker. You would think that you're going to get more scoring with those guys, on paper at least. But I wonder what they miss on defense, particularly with the Reggie Bullock, who, you know, they talked all year long about how key he was on the defensive end for Tom Thibodeau's club. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out, but they certainly chose to mostly keep the band back together after a strong 2020-21 season.
Yeah, possibly preparing for a big year in 2022. And Bobby, the big move the Knicks made was picking up Kemba Walker after he received a contract buyout from the Thunder, of course, considering his injury history, but also considering, you know, the type of player he is when healthy. How do you feel about this acquisition for the New York Knicks?
I felt there was no risk at all, just based on now, if you're telling me you're going to acquire Kemba in a trade and he had $73 million left on his contract, then I'd say, yeah, there's probably a risk. But to have him come in at a $9 to $10 million contract, which is basically the mid-level exception, and you already have, you know, Derrick Rose and Emmanuel Quickley there as your guards, you can play him 50 games during the year and monitor his minutes here. And it was 2 years ago that he was an all-star. And I think he can still play at a high level, but as you said, it all comes down to how he is health-wise here. So for a player at that level for $9 to $10 million, I didn't think, even if it never works out, just because there was really nothing else out there, cap space, free agent-wise, I thought it was a great move. Yeah,
I thought it was, a smart move, a decision, that could have a lot of payoff. And if it doesn't work out, as you said, you're not slapping yourself in the face for that type of decision. CP, when you look at Kemba Walker coming to the Knicks, coming back to his hometown, how optimistic are you that Kemba can be a major contributor this year and help the team in the playoffs?
If he's healthy, I'm very optimistic. As Bobby said, it's a low-risk move. He's going to come in and open up the offense. They have another shot creator. Automatically, he becomes the best starting point guard that both Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson will be playing with, RJ Barrett as well. So that core will get an upgrade with Kemba Walker. We know that Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier had great chemistry together during Fournier's 16 games with Boston. He finished the season well last year. The last 10 games, he averaged about 23 points per game on about 38% shooting from three on 33 minutes per game. And so I think that the hedge against the injury is that we have depth now. So Derrick Rose can come in. He can give you about his typical 20, 25 minutes off the bench. You have Quickley, who can give you some ball handling responsibility. Alec Burks as well. And as we're seeing in Summer League, Miles McBride, if he can continue to play good defense and stay poised as he's been in these two games, I think he'll press for playing time on the days where they may, institute some load management for Kemba Walker and Derrick Rose. So I'm confident that Kemba can make an impact on this team.
Yeah, a lot of Knicks fans are hoping for that, to see him flourish in the Garden. Once again, write your questions into the comment section, no matter what platform you're watching on, and we'll get to them throughout the show. Ian, while there may be varying expectations of what the Knicks get from Kemba. Fans are hopeful to get a repeat output from Julius Randle this season. You reported that Julius has signed a 4-year, $117 million extension with the Knicks after taking home the most improved player of the year honors last season. So take us through how the Knicks and Randle came to this long-term commitment.
Well, what I was told on the day it was first reported by Bobby's guy, Woj, was that Julius Randle, first of all, wanted to commit the prime of his career to New York because he saw this franchise as a great fit for himself, loves the fans, loves the organization, and he wanted to give the Knicks some financial flexibility moving forward. Now, if he had waited and signed as an unrestricted free agent next summer, he had the capacity to sign a deal worth as much as $200 million. But I think part of this, though, was the idea that it's a risk, right? If you're going into next season and you have to stay healthy and perform at a high level to maintain that status as a potential max free agent, there's a risk that things could go wrong there. So I think part of it was him taking what was on the table as opposed to rolling the dice and trying to get more money. Either way, a pretty solid contract for the Knicks. I think Bobby could speak more of this, but I think even if Randle is maybe 85, 90% of the player this year that he was last year, it still should be pretty good value for the Knicks. Bobby, what did you think?
Well, I thought it was a win-win for both, just because I was concerned with Julius. I think he led the league in minutes this past year, the wear and tear to kind of bet on yourself and go into free agency. And you just don't know if that 100 million plus contract will be there again. I think we're seeing it right now with Dennis Schroeder and what's gone on with the Lakers. I mean, whenever someone can give you 106 million guaranteed, and there's about 11 million of those bonuses that carried over. I just thought it was a win-win for where he is at his career, and it gives him, I think, like $12 million in flexibility, per year. And if it ever became a time down the road, if it had to be moved, it's that a $23 million contract per year is a lot easier than a $36 million contract. So I just thought it was a win-win. And I know the naysayers out there are looking at the Atlanta series, but I think you got to look at the whole body of work for what he's been able to do. And people are probably also looking like, hey, we could have had cap space and all this other things. But I always say cap space is a little bit of fool's gold, right? I think you got to build your roster. Building through the draft, through the trade market is a little bit more realistic than trying to go out there with, $60-70 million in cap space.
Yeah, definitely. And CP, when you look at Julius Randle, what's your confidence level in him as Knicks' best player? And do you worry about any regression this upcoming season?
Well, I think ideally on a true championship contender, I think Julius Randle is probably your third best option. But on this Knicks team, I think you take it based on what happened last year. I mean, career highs across the board, 24 points per game, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. He was an excellent playmaker for us, over 40% from three. And that was good enough to help us get to that fourth seed in the East. And so I think, with the contract that we gave him, the contract extension, it was a favorable deal for the Knicks. It's something that they can move on from in the future if they need to. It gives them some flexibility. But for now, I think he's a guy that you're comfortable building with, not around. And I think the Knicks tried to do that under some sort of discipline, right? They brought back Derrick Rose. They brought in Alec Burks, Fournier, Kemba. You have shot creation. They prioritize shot creation in this offseason, bringing in Quentin Grimes, Miles McBride in the draft as well. Hopefully RJ Barrett takes an uptick. So with Julius here, you have guys that can help him. And hopefully, they increase their win totals a little bit over last year.
And hopefully they're able to get past, the first round of the playoffs with all the additions that they made in this offseason. Bobby, the Knicks obviously, going off of that note, they want to compete this year. But I think everyone knows, or most people know, that they have their eyes on future off seasons and trade possibilities. So how would you assess the Knicks' current cap situation and their flexibility to make some big moves in the future and shake things up?
Yeah, I mean, I think for right now until December 15th, you're in a holding pattern. Just because when you look at the roster, the majority of the players you signed can't be moved until after December 15th. So, which is tricky because what happens if Damian Lillard next week wants out of Portland? You just don't have the money to put together a deal. When you look at with RJ and you just add up these rookie contracts, you don't have the money. So if you're a Knicks fan, you're hoping that happens after December 15th, either, him or maybe even a guy like Bradley Beal or whoever that next disgruntled all-star is. But when you look at their cap sheet, they've got 7 players in that 9 to 23 range of contracts, which is the sweet spot. Like whenever you want to try to put a deal together, it's those players who are making 10 or $11 million to add up there. It's very challenging when you have a top heavy roster of 3 players making 30 million plus, and then you have a bunch of maybe guys on minimum contracts, $2 to $3 million. That is really, Boston had a hard time for a while do that when they had Kemba and they had Gordon Hayward. I think Al Horford might have even been there, where they were top heavy, and I think Marcus Smart was basically the only contract in that $10 million range. So you have the contracts to make it work down the road because they're team friendly like deals. You're not going to be a cap space team next offseason, but that's fine. I mean, I think the teams figure a way. If a star player wants to come play for you, you figure a way how to make it work. Either if you're moving off money or maybe you're going to the trade route. We've seen even in Toronto with the Kyle Lowry situation that, they wind up turning him into 2 players, right? So teams are looking to turn, their player into something other than just an empty salary cap slot. So I think they're in really good shape. It's you're going into year 3 of RJ. So next year is his extension year. Mitchell Robinson, we got to figure out kind of what to do with him, right? He's extension eligible, but potentially could be an unrestricted free agent here. But there's no dead cap money. Of course, the number this year, but from a player standpoint, they're all movable contracts down the road. And so I think they're sitting in really good shape.
Bobby, the interesting thing based on Lillard, and also you mentioned Beal and even Zach LaVine, I know the Knicks had kept an eye on all 3 of those guys entering the offseason, and with Beal and LaVine, it was just keeping an eye on where their situations were with their current teams. But with Lillard, I mean, the Knicks, you said it, obviously you wait until after December 15th. You hope for Lillard to mention any trade possibilities. I think it's just a matter of when and not if, but that's just a guess on my point. But if you look at Golden State or Philadelphia, I mean, do you think that there are much more attractive trade packages out there for a player like Lillard if those teams were to get involved?
I think it's a matter, if you're Philadelphia, how much are you willing to give up? Right? Are you willing to give up Simmons, Maxey, and Tybalt? That's who I would be looking for, if in a Lillard package. Their draft picks are certainly limited because what they owe Oklahoma City from the Horford trade. The Knicks have all the draft picks in the world. And as I say, it's just a matter of timing. If you listen to Joe Lacob, the owner in Golden State, he's made it sound that he's not going big game hunting for that next all-star. He wants to see Kuminga and Moses Moody develop around the core of Thompson Green and Curry and certainly the Wiggins contract, which was not very pretty a couple of years ago. Now it's only got 2 years left, right? So I think that's kind of how you stack up. I think if you just can kind of bide your time and get to December, then you have as of an attractive package to send out if that time comes.
Yeah. And, we'll definitely be waiting for that moment when that time comes. And Ian, Taco Nacho is asking, is a big move still possible going into next season? And what about Miles Turner?
Well, Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they still have an exception left to spend, but the roster is pretty full. And that would be the only way to make a big move at this point, is a trade, a Miles Turner trade, or a trade for another player. We know Buddy Hield's name was out there. I'd be a bit surprised if that came along, because the theme throughout the offseason, at least once things got started, was, hey, continuity, stability. We won 41 games last year. We want to bring a lot of those guys back. And I think part of that was because the Knicks knew that big swing wasn't really out there this offseason. And, if you're an executive group, you probably only get 1 or 2 chances to make a really big deal. I think the Knicks are sitting, waiting for their chance to take a big swing, and it wasn't there this summer. And I don't see how Hield or Turner is that kind of swing that takes them, to the top of the East. So I wouldn't expect anything major between now and the beginning of the season.
And CP, Bobby mentioned, Mitchell Robinson's future, and Marlon Small on that note is asking, will Mitchell take a leap a la like DeAndre Jordan. He has gotten his weight up to 275. What do you think?
So number one for Mitch is you're hoping for a healthy season out of him. But number two, I think he can, playing with both Kemba Walker and Derrick Rose on a full-time basis if he's healthy, because those are guys that can help get him involved in the alley-oops, all for the pick and roll. We know Mitch's defensive proficiency, the way that he can rotate around the perimeter. I thought that was sorely missed, even though Noel came in and was able to rim protect for us. I think Mitch is a much more versatile defender. So I think he can, with another year under Tom Thibodeau's leadership, and then playing alongside some nice pick and roll point guards like Kemba Walker and Derrick Rose, I think Mitch can take another step.
Yeah, let's hope that he's able to, advance his game and decide, or he can give the Knicks, more options than he was able to do, the past couple of seasons. And Bobby, one of the players that the Knicks signed this offseason, obviously, Evan Fournier, 4 years, $78 million deal for him. What did you make of that deal? Did you like that for the Knicks? Did you think they should have maybe gave him, one less year?
Shooting's a premium in this league. I mean, you saw what Tim Hardaway got, right? In Dallas. I mean, he's coming off a great Olympics playing for France. His year in Boston after the trade was a little bit mixed because of the COVID situation here. But I had him probably in that $14 to $16 million range. I think to pry him away from other teams, you do have to, I don't want to say overspend, but kind of pay a premium. I mean, his contract hasn't come in yet, but we're probably looking at like a $17.6 million cap hit. But I'm fine with that contract. I think, he'll, slide into your, starting two spot. We could see a former Celtic backcourt of Walker and Fournier there. But based on what the market, Norman Powell got 5 for 90. I mean, that is a big number there. So yeah, I think it's a solid contract. I think he's in the prime of his career. I think if he can give you 16, 18 points a game, that's what you're looking at.
I would say he's absolutely an upgrade over Reggie Bullock. Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah, it's just different, right? I mean, Reggie's
a
little bit different player, and I actually like the Reggie contract in Dallas. I mean, it's 3 years and there's a partial, but he fits. There was a need and a specialty for him in Dallas, maybe less in New York. I didn't see New York paying him, $12-13 million based on just kind of how your roster already was. But I do think it's an upgrade, certainly from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah. And Ian, so they bring in Evan Fournier, but one fan favorite that is going to be sticking around for another year is Derrick Rose, as well as Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, two players that we've mentioned already. How did you feel about the Knicks returning these guys to the roster?
Yeah, it made sense to me, Chris, because again, that big move is not there for you right now. So you have some draft picks to cash in at some point. You had this cap space that you could play with, but there was no big move this summer for them because Kyle Lowry was going where he was going. Chris Paul was staying in Phoenix. We knew that. And Kawhi Leonard, nobody thought was going to really go anywhere. So the idea of holding on to what you had last year because you had some success made sense to me. Bobby could speak more specifically to the contract numbers. I know some people were scratching their head at some of those deals, but if you look into the future, 2 years, 1 summer, 2 summers down the line, these are tradable contracts. It's not like you overpaid anybody a gross amount to where that contract becomes an albatross. So I think part of it was stability and part of it was holding on to some flexibility for the future. Whether that comes to fruition, we'll see. But I thought it did make sense to make the moves they did given where they were.
And CP, with the Knicks spending $43 million on Derrick Rose, do you like that? Are you a fan of that the numbers right there, or do you think they should have given him less given his age?
Well, when the deals first were announced for all three, Rose, Burks, and Noel, you kind of, scratch your head a little bit. And then as the days passed and you found out that there were full team options on those deals, you became a bit more comfortable with it. But Rose, the player, there's no doubt that he was a catalyst for this team in terms of them obtaining that 4th seed in the East. I mean, once they got him in the trade deadline, they were a completely different team and on and off the court. And I remember a conversation I had with Men of World Peace, and he talked about, the advantage advantages of playing with quality veterans that could really go in and help these young guys how to win and show them what to do. And that was evident in Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson's contributions to the team. So I think Rose being here definitely gives us a lift. Having Kemba here to kind of have them in a platoon, I think it's definitely beneficial for us as well. And yeah, I think, Rose coming back, once the pieces came off the board in free agency and a lot of the point guards came off the board, Lowry went to the Heat, Reggie Jackson was still there, Dennis Schroeder was still there, but Rose was still the best option for us. And so it became more and more critical for him to return to the team once the point guard options were coming off the board.
Bobby, one thing on Derrick Rose and just generally the what the Knicks did. I mean, when you're an executive and you have a roster that has surpassed expectations last year, let's say, how do you feel about the continuity approach versus kind of blowing it up again or making big changes after that season and trying to push forward? I mean, particularly with the Knicks situation, like how do you look at that from an executive standpoint?
Yeah, it's funny. Teams kind of get themselves in trouble when they kind of trend towards other teams' free agents and don't value your own players. I see it all the time where like you think, all right, well, this group got us to 42 wins. Let's see what we can go out and get in free agency. Maybe we can take that next step and just keep Julius and RJ and kind of just add other pieces. And then when you get them here in training camp, you're like, man, I miss Derrick Rose and I miss Nerlens Noel and I miss Alec Burks because you already knew what you had. And I just think it's going to be important for them to get out of the gate quick. I think they have a huge advantage we'll see when the schedule comes out because as you said, you have the continuity factor. I never thought this was a free agent market for big swings here. I just didn't see it. I didn't see like anybody out there that was worth taking a big swing. I didn't see it 3 years, $85 million guaranteed to DeMar DeRozan. I just, if you would have told me maybe 2 years, 40 for DeMar DeRozan, I said maybe. I just didn't see it. Even with Kyle, I didn't see 3 for 90. I mean, it's a big number. And I always say like, we're all in this honeymoon period. The offseason is the honeymoon period. We all like our roster. And until you get to like middle of the year and you'd be like, man, that Kyle Lowry contract for year 2 and 3 is pretty bad, So I think you just have to be careful as far as how you evaluate. And I know it doesn't sell headlines, but the continuity factor is important, especially when you have guys that can still play. I mean, the 3 guys you brought back are still quality players there.
Yeah, it's not like they're scrubs or anything like that. They definitely provide a value to the Knicks organization. And we're going to get back to the Knicks in just a little bit. But Bobby, one question on the Nets. So with Kevin Durant back on that 4-year extension, do you think Harden, and Irving will do the same? And do you think these extensions factored in to the Nets letting Dinwiddie walk?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly from a finance standpoint, no owner likes to pay a big luxury tax. I don't care if you're worth $20 billion. When you write $100 million check to the league, it's not a great feeling. So I do think the finances paid away for Spencer leaving because it would have been a high amount towards their luxury tax. And plus when you're paying Kyrie, $36 million, and then you want to bring Dinwiddie back at 18, 19. I think it had an impact there. So Durant's off the board. I think Harden will be next. His extension is 3 for 161. That we'll see. It'll be interesting as far as the approach they take with Kyrie. I mean, I think you have to, right? I mean, if you're going to do the other two, you'll have one disgruntled player if he is not taken care of, and it's a whopper of a number. It's like 4 for like 180. It's a big number here. They did a good job of Patty Mills bringing him in as a kind of a low cost insurance policy, but when it's said and done, I mean, the 3 guys I think it's $540 million in extensions.
Jeez.
That's the numbers. And there'll be a year when all 3 are making north of $50 million. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's like the Curry number. Curry in his last year is making $59 million. I mean, it's ridiculous, like where we are right now. So that's why it's really hard to kind of turn the wheel every year, to bring in minimum guys, to hit on your draft picks, those low cost Bruce Brown type players when you have 3 guys making that much money. So you got to hopefully have a really good scouting department. But I do think by the end of this offseason, all 3 will already Durant, but the other 2 will probably be extended here.
Bobby, I sit here and I play Monday morning quarterback a little bit when I look at Dinwiddie and even to a lesser extent Frank Ntilikina, because I just wonder, could Brooklyn have gotten more back had they dealt him, let's say the trade deadline last year or prior to last season? I mean, I think he would have been traded prior to last season if the Harden deal had gotten done earlier. But how do you see that? And also a guy like Ntilikina, who I don't think anyone has officially ruled out a return to the Knicks, but if they do lose him for nothing, how do front offices see that? As like a sunk cost, or do they say, man, we may have been able to do better here had we done this earlier?
Well, I think Frank's a little bit different because Leon inherited him, right? It was from the prior regime here, so you're kind of wiping your hands clean. So I think it's a little bit different. I think Dinwiddie, Ian's trade value at the deadline was similar to what they got back in the sign and trade with Washington, a trade exception and a future second. I think that's kind of where it was. I didn't think a team out there was going to give up a lot to get just his bird rights, and then you have to basically overpay him there. So it's tough, though. I mean, he's kind of one of their, Spencer was one of their, him, LeVert, Joe Harris, that whole group was one of those under the radar type guys they found. But he outplayed his contract, and then you just have to make a decision when, as I said, it was a very expensive insurance policy for Kyrie. I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it.
You can imagine that bill for Joe Tsai and the ownership group, had they brought Spencer back in addition to extending the big three. I mean, it would have been astronomical. So
it would have broken our bill in 2013-14. I know. Hey, and I'm happy to pass that torch along.
Right, like, good.
Golden State or Brooklyn, or one of those teams. So what happened, guys, too, is that what happens is that ownership will always green light those type of moves until you get into the middle of the year and you're 20-20 and Spencer Dinwiddie's not playing a lot. And then you're like, wait a minute, I just paid $140 million for this guy for this one season. Yeah. And he's averaging 8 points and shooting 34% from the field. So that's kind of what, from an executive standpoint, you want to just like, you know what, we're just going to kind of go in a different direction there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to wrap things up with CP. Going back to the Knicks, finish this in. All right, so the Knicks will find great success in 2021, 2022 if
they stay healthy. You look at Kemba, Derrick Rose, Mitchell Robinson. I think those are going to be three key pieces for us. Obviously, Julius Randle, he's been fairly durable throughout his career, except for his rookie year. But I think, Kemba, D Rose, Mitch, if they stay healthy, Julius continues on his trajectory. RJ takes another step. He averaged 17 points per game this year on 40% shooting. Can he get to that 20 point per game milestone? I think we'll be in good shape. We have the depth, we have the continuity, we have the stability, the chemistry carrying over from last year. So I think injuries health will be the key to this team's success next season.
Absolutely. Future will be bright, or is bright, for the New York Knicks right now. And so as the show is titled, this is the season 1 finale of the Putback with Ian Begley. Don't worry, we're only taking a few weeks off to catch our breath, but we will be back in October before the Knicks' quest for a postseason spot and more gets underway. So for Ian Begley, Bobby Marks, CP, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.